I'm Sam.
And this is Gabe.
And this is Coaster Wars.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are here today on another episode of the Coaster Wars podcast. And boy, do we got a good one. You know, these two roller coasters, their intent is the same. They both want to do the same thing to you, but they both have very different ways of doing that.
Oh, wildly different ways of doing that. Holy bejesus. They even have different ride spots. One ride I feel like is a better front row ride, and the other one 100% tried and true back row ride on that coaster. So they want to do the same thing to you, but sort of in different ways, which is really fun to kind of analyze in these coasters.
Yeah, and one roller coaster is kind of a repetitive, maybe not as creative. And then the other coaster is definitely, a modern, innovative, different, something that you can't ride everywhere. So I think it's a good comparison here to see which one comes out on top on this battle.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, especially because the one that you're doing is much higher on my list, and mine isn't even included on your list. So we'll see how it passes out. Cheese and crackers, I can't talk. We're doing another late night recording, and we gotta get out of the habit of doing this, because I cannot think straight. Would you like to introduce our friends? Goodness gracious.
I suppose. Alright. In the red corner, standing at a height of 202 feet, reaching a top speed of 73 miles per hour, hailing from the farm fields of Illinois and the B&M gym, it is Raging Bull. In the blue corner, standing at a height of 130 feet, reaching a top speed of 58 miles per hour, hailing from the trees of New Jersey and the RMC gym, it is Jersey Devil Coaster. Let the fight begin. Alright, so my number 9 roller coaster here is going to be Raging Bull.
And my number 9 coaster is Jersey Devil Coaster.
Alright, let's dive right into Raging Bull. This coaster, for me and you, is a nostalgic coaster. I don't know about you, but even though I live in Wisconsin and we're closer to Mount Olympus, I consider Six Flags Great America my home park, just because it's like top tier amusement park, so I kind of cheat a little bit there. And this coaster, me and you have ridden probably 1,000 times at this point. Let's be honest here.
So many times. I mean, and it's like, it's generally when we go to this park, it's like the one that you get your last ride on. So it don't matter what other ride you're riding. It's like instant, like 9:55 or whatever. You beeline it for this ride and you just jump in line as fast as you can.
Yeah, for sure. This is one of our favorites. Me and you both love this roller coaster, and for good reason. It's a really good ride. Not, even though we have the nostalgic factor of it, it's still a top tier B&M hyper. This is my favorite of the B&M hyper, so I rank this even above Diamondback, which is another really, really good one that we talked about earlier in this podcast. And it's just a great ride from start to finish. And I just love it. It's one of the first B&M hypers. Everybody knows that Apollo's Chariot is the first, but however, Raging Bull was opened in the same year. But because obviously it was in Illinois and not Virginia, it had to wait a month and a half to open it. So that's how Apollo's Chariot gets the number 1 B&M coaster opening, even though they were both opened in the same year. It's just a really good ride for sure.
Yes. Comparing those two rides, because they were built in the same year and stuff like that, Apollo's Chariot was built more as an out and back layout, but when they came to design Raging Bull, they had to fit it in the kind of space that they had, and I forget what the term they used. I think it was called this is their twisted model or something, but more
twister layout.
Yeah,
is the term they use. It's a twister layout.
Okay, so, but the point I'm trying to get at is that it's just not a normal out and back layout that you get with a lot of B&M hypers. It has a lot more twists and turns, and this one has a figure 8 in it that just add an extra elements and give you some really good laterals that you don't normally get in a B&M Hyper that's more focused on that float or air time it's trying to give you.
Part of the reason why I love this roller coaster so much is it's such a well-rounded B&M Hyper. Like most B&M Hypers, like Apollo's Chariot and Intimidator at Carowinds and even Nitro at Six Flags Great Adventure, they're airtime, 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 which we all love it. You know, we all love airtime. That's why we like B&M Hypers. But this is not just airtime. You have laterals, you have G-forces, you have turns, you have twists, you have some different elements and stuff, and stuff that you. This roller coaster has some elements and stuff that aren't perfected, that aren't the greatest. But it's funny because there's some elements on here that inspired elements that you see in today's roller coasters, because everybody loved this ride so much when it opened. I've had the privilege of riding both Apollo's Chariot and Raging Bull, and they're not even in the same field. They're not even in the same ballpark. Apollo's Chariot is by far the worst B&M Hyper I've ever ridden, which, again, it was the first. But to go from Apollo's Chariot to Raging Bull within a month span for B&M is an awesome feat. And they did a really, really good job building this roller coaster. And I just absolutely love it from start to finish.
Well, yeah, and then you have to talk about that history part of it being the second B&M Hyper and how widespread B&M in general is at parks nowadays. I mean, you don't normally have just one B&M coaster at a park. You have multiples because you have their invert models, you have their wing models, you have their floorless models, their stand-up models, their hypers, and their giga models. It's like they have so many different kinds. And then you can talk about the capacity of these roller coasters. They generally have, what is it, 8 rows of 4? I can't remember.
They're all a little bit different. Like Diamondback, they have the staggered seating on that ride. This one I think is 9 cars per train, so it's a little bit longer.
Okay.
And so they're not all the same. That's the thing. They tweak it here and there depending on the layout and the elements and stuff like that. But for the most part, they're generally, capacity monsters. They never break down, or if they do break down, they're gone for maybe 25 or 30 minutes, and then they're up and running. V&M has kind of become old reliable in the roller coaster manufacturing world. When you go to them and you order a roller coaster, yeah, you're going to be paying top dollar. You're going to be paying Intamin prices, but you're going to get a roller coaster that is going to last for years. And you're going to get a roller coaster that's never going to break down. And you're going to get a roller coaster that can chew through a queue line like nobody's business. And that's what, amusement park needs for the general public. And just to make people happy, in general, that, they don't want to be sitting in line for 3 hours and then the roller coaster breaks down.
Oh, yeah.
So, so that's where B&M comes in and says, well, we'll give you a reliable coaster that can chew through, a number of people.
Well, and to talk about Raging Bull specifically in that sense, because it is such a popular ride at Six Flags Great America, and it has such a long line, Six Flags knows that. And so what they do is they put their best team on this ride. If you get a really good day with everybody getting into it and everything, you can get trains in and out of that station, I swear, like 30 seconds. And even especially at the end of the day, it almost seems like a competition. Everybody in line is just going as fast as possibly can just so you can get trains in and out at the end of the day as fast as possible. And it actually creates this really awesome energy that I love at the end of the night. Everybody just racing as fast as possible and people start cheering as the train goes out. Oh, it's a lot of fun if you go to ride this ride.
Yeah, there's another reason why I consider this to be my favorite B&M, and there's one reason and one reason only. There's no seatbelts on Raging
yeah.
Bull, which makes it so much more fun than some of the newer ones where they got seatbelts. I rode Fury 325. I can't remember. I believe that one has a seatbelt. And it kind of holds you back from the airtime a little bit. But Raging Bull, it's old enough. It's just got that nice little clamshell restraint. The best, I don't care what anybody says, the clamshell B&M restraint is the best restraint in the business. It is the most free-feeling and most comfortable restraint especially if you're a bigger person like myself. And it's just the best restraint in the business. And that's another reason why these B&M Hypers are so popular. But Raging Bull puts it up a little bit higher just because there is no seatbelt.
Absolutely. And me and Gabe are those roller coaster, I don't even know if it's a roller coaster enthusiast thing, but we're those kinds of people that what we do, or at least what I do, is I purposely leave my knees up just a little bit and just leave it that, so it could technically maybe go down just one more click, but you leave it up that one more click, and then of course you gotta put your knees up, because when they come to check it, so they don't press it down too hard, and then you get that extra little, like, couple centimeters of room, and you just feel those floaters even more, especially on that first drop. Oh, it's just wow.
Oh boy. Don't get me started on that drop, man.
Okay,
I could talk for
wait.
days.
We gotta pause for a second, go into this layout. We haven't even explained what this coaster does to you, and then we can start talking about
Okay. All right. So this layout starts with a 208-foot drop, which is actually taller than the lift hill height. That is because it drops below grade and goes through a tunnel, which is a super fun experience. After that, you got the first of a couple. I don't want to call it an overbank turn because that's not what it is. It kind of goes up and pops up, and you get a little airtime, and then it banks and turns, and then it pops back towards the ground. So it's not an overbank where you get G forces. It's more of a airtime pop, G force, airtime pop, and then you head back towards the ground after you go through a 180-degree curve. That's where you hit the first of a straight full airtime hill, which lasts like, I swear to God, it's got to be like a 4-second airtime hill.
it's
After
ridiculous.
that, you pop up into a very interesting element that, and this is where I was talking about earlier in the podcast. It's really similar to what you would call nowadays a wave turn, but it's not quite as refined. So you kind of pop up, it banks, and then you turn, and you get some really nice floater airtime, and it kind of acts like a wave turn, but it's not quite banked enough to be a full wave turn. But yeah, that's kind of an element that gave inspiration to some of B&M's future projects, and it's a really good element. It's one of the best in the ride. After that, you pop up into the second 180-degree turn, and it's the same thing as the first one, where you get airtime, some G-forces, and then some, and then you kind of dives towards the ground. After that, you pop up into the mid-course brake run, and the airtime exiting the brake run is really, really good in the back row. After that, you hit another straightforward airtime hill before popping up into a 360-degree helix. That gives some really good forces, and at the top of that, you get another really good airtime pop in the back row. And this is the best part of the ride, in my opinion. The back-to-back G-force helixes. First, you got one to the left. Then you got one that goes all the way around 360 degrees to the right. One last little airtime pop before another helix back to the left and popping up into the final brakes. And that really is a great grand finale. You get some really nice G-forces in those 3 helix turn things at the end.
Oh yeah. When I was doing the research and I found that the top speed on this thing was 73 miles per hour, I was like, how did I not know that? That is so freaking fast. And this ride just carries it throughout the whole thing. And like you said, when you go into those helix, you get some amazing laterals that you're not expecting on a B&M Hyper. And it just sends you through it so fast. And you come back up into that final brake run back into the station. And like you said, amazing grand finale for this ride. And it also makes it unique amongst the B&M Hypers and really makes it stand above the other ones.
Yeah, the G-forces are really what set it apart, I think, for me, is because, like I said, you get a really good mix. It's not just airtime. You get airtime, G-forces. Airtime, G-forces. It bounces you like a bouncy ball back and forth, and that's what I really like about it. But let's go visit that first drop for a second. So I mentioned earlier it has 9 car trains, and that back row seat on the first drop, you guys can argue this in the comments. I'm sure you're going to argue this with me a little bit. This is the best first drop I've experienced on any roller coaster ever. And that includes a lot of really good first drops in my list.
Oh, hell yeah.
It is just there's just something about the fact that this roller coaster has the little pre-drop section.
Oh,
It
yep.
has the 9-car trains, and it has a drop that is longer than its actual height, and you put that all together, and it catches you off guard when you ride this roller coaster for the first time. You have to go straight to the back row, otherwise you're going to say I'm nuts. If you ride this in the front row or even in the middle of the train, you don't get the same experience as the very back row, and it's just outer worldly. This first drop, that's the best word I can use to describe it. I'm sure you can attest to it as well.
Oh, 100%. And I know our credit counts don't seem that large at only 100 and some coasters, but at the same time, we've ridden 100 different coasters, and we collectively have learned that there are magic seats on a lot of coasters. There are certain seats that just make it better for whatever reason, and it's not always the back row. There are certain ones where it is the front that makes it better. There's certain ones where it's a weird one where was it El Toro where it was like the second to last row on the right side or something? Um
Yep. So El Toro's the second to last row, and it's the left seat, I believe. Another good example is Maverick and the Magic seat. It's the third row of the first train, or the first car, I mean, and that is crazy intense airtime as well, which we'll talk about that later.
yeah.
I believe we'll be talking about that coaster in the future.
Yes. With,
um,
with Raging
and
Bull.
and yeah, there's just certain seats, there's certain rows that have better seats. Look at Nitro even. The back row on the right side, I don't know if you remember this,
Oh
it
yeah.
had that really crazy transition heading into the final brake run where it like throws you out of the seat.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there's a few seats and stuff where you can kind of learn and stuff. Especially if you get a bunch of rides on a roller coaster, you can really go through each row and each individual seat and experiment a little. But yeah, this is definitely a back row ride. And the two best moments for me are the first drop and then that end helix section. I just love that combination of those two elements in this roller coaster. And you could probably take the rest of this roller coaster out, and I'd still rank this in my top 15, honestly, because it's just so good.
It really is. And like me and Gabe said, we were spoiled. This is the first B&M Hyper that we rode, and so unfortunately anything stacked up against next to it just doesn't really compare in our books. And so for my piece, because I'll talk about it with every ride, we have to talk about the theming with this ride, and believe it or not, it's actually here. So, first of all is the name Raging Bull. It's located in the Southwest Territory section of the park, which obviously is Western themed. But the whole story of the Raging Bull was that this was a ferocious beast that terrorized the Southwest Territory until the people ran away, and they built the courtyard, which is the big courtyard that you walk in, and I believe they have a big building there that has a teacup ride, and then a mission where the people stayed, and that actually serves as the station for Raging Bull. And then, if you think about it, the name of this ride is another one that fits pretty good, because you really feel like you're on the back of a bucking bull that is just trying to whip you off as hard as it can.
Oh, for sure. It definitely fits in. We're going to run out of time here if we don't switch gears. So, we got Jersey Devil Coaster, which is your number 9 roller coaster. The first thing I just want to say is it did not make my list, and I want to talk about that for a little bit. When I was looking through and I was trying to figure out why it didn't, I was kind of scratching my head a little bit. Honestly, I was like, wow, I wonder why. I think honestly what it comes down to is number one, the restraints are absolutely atrocious.
Junk. Absolute
especially
junk.
for a guy especially for a guy my size and the way my body structure is built, it is horrible. For you it's probably just a little bit better. And then the other reason I think it comes down to is some roller coasters are my favorite and not necessarily the best. This is a roller coaster that can fall into the category of one of the better roller coasters I've experienced. And, but it might not necessarily be my favorite. It might not necessarily stick out in my brain. However, I do think it's the second best ride at Great Adventure. I would say that.
Okay. So to talk about this ride for a little bit isn't.
I'm sorry, third best,
I,
third
I
best,
was about
third
to
best
question
ride.
that for a second, but I'm like, whatever, it's his opinion. Um, so this is actually, I would like to put this out. This is our first RMC in our list. But I would
It
also,
is. Yes,
yeah,
it is.
it's our first RMC on our list. But I believe I have 4 in mine, and you have 3 in yours, and they are all within our top 10. So that just speaks to the caliber of roller coaster that RMC builds. So,
Yes,
but
but this is also your first. This is also your first single rail, correct?
yes, so this is
Okay.
Jersey Devil Coaster is RMC's Raptor track design, which is a single rail, and as of right now, there's only 4 in existence, and this is the newest one. It was built in 2021, and to also point out, the other 3. What am I
No, the
messing up?
newest one's actually out. The newest one's actually out in Magic Mountain now. They built one this year,
Oh well, that's dumb. No.
but it's the same layout. So,
Oh well, see that would.
well, it's a mirrored version of the layout, I should say.
Is it a mirrored version of this one though, or the old ones?
Yes, it's a mirrored version of Jersey Devil Coaster.
Okay, so that was going to be my point, was that the first 3 versions of this Raptor track were all either, one of them was a clone and one of them was a mirror, I think. Don't quote me, but the point was is that at the time that this one was built, it was a brand new original layout, and it was a more compact layout. And what they did is it sort of was like an out and back, but it did an out back 3 times. And so it's got a very small, skinny layout, and it was a little bit shorter. No, actually it wasn't shorter, was it? I think, was it taller than the other?
3,000 feet of track, so it's longer than Wonder Woman, but not by much.
Okay. I was gonna say shorter, but then I think when I was doing my research, I found that when it was built, it was the tallest, fastest, and longest single rail when it was built. So,
Yep. So yeah, instead of calling it an out and back layout, it's more of a, I call it a cyclone layout. So Cyclone was the Coney Island Cyclone, where it's basically like a giant bowl, and then it goes around 3 times.
okay.
That's more of what you could call this layout, more of a Cyclone style layout, or you could call it, like you said, a back and forth layout. That's definitely a good way to describe it.
Yeah. So to go into the layout of this ride real quick, it starts with a climb to its 130-foot drop, and it's an accelerated lift hill too. So like once it locks into that chain, it speeds up. So you're up there really fast. And then it is that 130-foot drop, 87 degrees. You get great air time, especially in the back row. I mean, that's a lot of rides that back row is where that first drop feels the best. But then you go right into a dive loop, and then you go into Camelback Airtime Hill, which leads into a 0G stall, which when you drop off of it gives you a little pop of ejector, which then leads into a 0G roll, which then leads into a brake run. And then on your final lap, it has 3 airtime hills. But the unique thing about these airtime hills is they're not all completely straight. So you have one that's a little bit curved to the right, one that's a little bit curved to the left, and then you do have one that's just straight up and down. And then that brings you back into the station. So
Yeah, the fancy word you'd use is they're off-axis airtime hills, which means they're they're leaned left or leaned right, like you were saying. They're not, just a straight up and down, which gives it a little bit of lateral as well as the airtime, especially if you're in, well, this roller coaster only has, a seat in each row. But if you're like on a 2 or 4 seat coaster, you'll really feel it on the one side when you get an off-axis airtime hill. The biggest thing that you really got to talk about with this roller coaster, I think you should talk about it because it's yours, is the different experiences between the front row and the back row and even the middle of the train.
oh yeah. So I'll start with the front. We'll go front to back. So the front row, the first thing that I have to point out is that because you are, like Gabe said, this is single rows. So there is 12 cars, but it's only a single person in each row, which already makes this a unique experience. But when you're in that very first row, you get to see that single rail, and it's a really weird experience. It's not something you get on any other type of coaster, and I don't know how to explain it, but it is so weird seeing that just single rail in front of you that you're following. But then yes, if you want ejectors really hard on this ride, you ride it in the front row because it is a it's a shorter train at only 12 cars, and because there's only single rows, it's not quite as heavy. So a lot of the times you're thrown into these elements and you're thrown into it with more speed and more force. And by the time it gets to that back row, you lose a little bit of that speed. So, going into elements, you get more forces, and then going over those airtime hills, you get better pops of ejector. Middle of the train kind of tones everything down just a little bit because you're in the middle. You still get really great forces and stuff like that too. But then when we hop into the back of the train, that's where you get that awesome floater off of the drop. The drop feels the best in the back row. And then those airtime hills, you get more of a floater effect instead of that ejector. And you get just a little less speed through the inversions. But I think I liked it better in the front row than in the back row. And I do actually, no, actually, I know that I liked it better in the front row because we rode it in the back row because that's where you ride everything first. And we got like a middle train row ride, I feel like. And then, or me and Gabe switched maybe, but I eventually got a front row ride and I literally got off and I was like, I haven't ridden this coaster before. What the heck was that? That was so much better. So for me, this is a,
Yeah, so what happened is both the first two times we rode it, I got the end seat on both sides. So I got the end seat in the back and I got the end seat in the front. So when we came back to this roller coaster later in the day, I said, you have to experience this in the front seat because it is completely different. And that's the ride that you were talking about. Element by element wise, so the dive loop, the zero G stall, and the zero G roll, I would say are all better in the front row. Because the dive loop, you get that really crazy whip going into it in the
oh
front
yeah.
seat, as well as in the zero G stuff. It kind of hangs you there just a second or two longer than in the back row. Like in the back row, you just get pulled through it and then you're done. Where in the front row, you get up into it and then it actually sits there for a little bit longer before flipping you back over and heading out of the element. And then the back row, any airtime hill and then the first drop are way better in the back. But part of the reason why I hate the restraints so much is because I have very bulky shoulders. I have very broad shoulders. And the way the restraints are designed is they're designed to put pressure on your thighs as well as your shoulders. But because I have such big shoulders, all of the pressure gets put onto my shoulders and zero of it gets put on my thighs. And because of that, anytime you hit those ejector moments, especially in the back row, it just is so uncomfortable and so painful. And it really hurts. You can't ride this roller coaster back to back because you come off of it with a little bit of pain, a little bit of soreness in your shoulders, especially if you're a bigger person. And then for you, I believe it was the opposite. It was your
Oh yeah.
thighs that you came off that were hurt.
Yep, exact opposite. I'm not nearly as tall as Gabe, and yeah, all that pressure was located right exactly on my thighs. I literally, the first time I rode this coaster, could not focus on the elements that it was putting me through because I was in so much pain from these restraints. So if this ride would be like 1,000 times better if it wasn't for those restraints. Oh,
Oh, for sure, for sure. But for you, the fact that you still hate the restraints and it still made you number 9 shows how impressive and how thrilling this roller coaster really is.
oh yeah. I could see maybe just talking in element section how you could think that pacing might be a little off on this ride with those 3 inversions sort of being at the beginning half and then the airtime hills kind of being at the second half. But no, you're thrown through this ride so fast that it doesn't even matter. And I think it has great pacing. I love all of the elements. And then as I'm doing more research and becoming more acquainted with roller coasters and stuff, I'm finding that where Gabe really likes history in rides, I'm really liking innovation in rides. And I love how this is something brand new from a brand new roller coaster company that is literally broke onto the stage of roller coaster design and building. And so I love how new and unique and completely out of this world this experience is.
Oh, for sure. But with that, we're hitting our time limit here. We're
Same.
hitting the number, so
Time goes so
I'll
fast.
let you go first this time. I'll let you say who you like better in this one.
I Jersey Devil is really cool, but Raging Bull holds a very special place in my heart, and you would have to freaking chisel it out with a hammer to get it out of there. So it's gonna be Raging Bull for me.
Okay. Can I give this as a tie? Can I give a tie out, or do I actually got to
You
pick
know
one?
what? We have never discussed that, but I will allow it. Yes.
Okay. So I was really thinking about it for a long time today while I was at work, and I kept going back and forth on these two roller coasters. Really, what it comes down to for Jersey Devil is the restraints. I love the pacing. I love the elements. I love the ejector airtime. I've always liked ejector over floater. But those restraints just take so much away from this ride. This could be a top five roller coaster in my opinion if it had better restraints. And when you go over to the Raging Bull, you have the best restraints in the business,
Oh.
but that maybe a little bit worse layout. It features forces, but maybe not as aggressive of forces. And that's why I kind of really want to give this a tie. That's kind of where I'm going here because I keep going back and forth. I can't pick one, which is crazy because this coaster isn't even on my list. Which again, because of the restraints. So yeah, that's you know what I'm calling it. It's a tie.
You know what? I like that assessment. I think Raging Bull is still just a little bit up there for me. And you know what? It's probably the nostalgia factor and the kind of sentimental value that this coaster has to me. But Jersey Devil Coaster is really, 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 really close behind that. And you know what's funny is I just talked about how cool this coaster is. I didn't even talk about the theming, and it's probably got some of my favorite theming, but that's because I like the legend and I like horror aspects and stuff. And the Jersey Devil is a cryptid, and that's just cool to me too. And they had an awesome statue out by it. But
Oh, for sure. And I mentioned this earlier in the podcast too. I said it's the third best ride at Six Flags Great Adventure, which means I rank this roller coaster over Nitro. I really do.
yeah,
So, and that's how close it is to Raging Bull because, in my opinion, Nitro is another really good B&M hyper, and I think this is better. But I also think Raging Bull is on kind of the same level as Nitro, just a little bit higher.
yeah.
But the restraints, I just can't get past the restraints on Jersey Devil.
Let's just hope that
Like,
RMC in the future will redesign those dumb things because it would do so much for their single rails. Because they're
honestly, RMC restraint systems are the only thing I can really knock RMC on, unless we start talking about Steel Vengeance, because then you'll have me going. But that's the future. That's a future thing. But with that, what do we got next week? Oh, we got the battle at Great America. So we're going to be going back to Great America. Two more roller coasters at the same park as Raging Bull.
Yes, that is going to be another very interesting mashup. But
Yes, two very intense roller coasters, but they're intense in two different ways.
yes. Before we close out here, I do
So,
have to make a quick correction. Last week we mentioned the email and how people can start emailing in suggestions for future episodes, because once me and Gabe get out of our top 15 here, we're going to need suggestions. Well, the email is actually coasterwarspodcast@gmail.com. And the previous description, it is the correct email. Ignore me in the actual physical episode. But yes, if anyone has any suggestions, just email them there, put in the subject line coaster suggestion, and me and Gabe will take and pick coasters and we will put them together and pit them against each other.
yeah, for sure. The one thing I would like to add is that if you have a set of coasters or just one coaster that you'd like to have us do, give us a reason why. Tell us why you'd like to see it or why you'd like to see a certain coaster battle. And like I said, me and her will go through the emails or whatever we get, and we'll just go through and pick what we like and what we don't like. So, but just give us a little bit more information on why you would like to see that roller coaster featured.
Yes, sounds good. So everybody come back next week and join us for the battle at Great America.